Hey, friends, welcome to the Connected Mom podcast. I am Becky Harling, your host, and we are going to start a brand new series about friendship because I happen to think that friends, especially for us women, but also for men, but especially for those of us that are women and moms, are crucially important. And so, over the next few weeks, we're going to be talking a lot about friendship. But I wanted to introduce the topic today where it's just me before we invite some other guests in. I've been thinking a lot about friendship. And I remember a season in my life where I was battling cancer and everything in my life really had to shut down because of treatments and then just recovering from those treatments. And though cancer was hard for me, it was also very clarifying for me. And I remember during the months where I just laid on the couch healing, I remember thinking, okay, moving forward, how do I want my life to look? How do I want to show up in this life of mine? One of the goals that I set was to just deepen my connection with the Lord in any way possible. And I did that. I spent long time in prayer, in Bible reading, and in praise and worship. And those months in his presence really increased my intimacy with Christ and made me feel like my friendship with him had really grown. But one of the other things that I really concluded during that time was that I needed more time with my friends. You see, before cancer, while I was raising my four kids, life was just very busy. And maybe that's true for you as well. From in my life, it was not only busy, getting the kids to soccer games and sporting events and dance and music and different clubs that they belong to, but I also had a lot of ministry things going on. I was always trying to launch the next group or go to a speaking event. I was working part time at my church, and I loved all of that. And to be honest with you, God didn't lead me to let go of any of that. In fact, He actually expanded those platforms for me. However, He showed me that I had to slow down enough in my inner being to really spend quality time with friends because my friends were treasures to me. So, what do I mean by that? I discovered that for me, a lot of times I was in a rush. I would get in the car, I would tell the kids, hurry up, we're going to be late, and we'd head out to the next thing. And during cancer, I decided I really needed to let go of some of that hurry and that I wanted to be more intentional about my friendships. Proverbs 1, verse 32 says that complacency of fools will destroy them. The complacency of fools will destroy them. The complacency that you might have in your friendships will also destroy the friendships because you see, friendships need to be nurtured and cared for. And here's what I know: we were never meant to do life alone. We are meant to do it in relationship, in close friendship with others. Jesus modeled this. He had the 12 disciples who were friends. Within that group of 12, he had Peter, James, and John, which many Bible scholars feel were his three best friends. Those were the friends he shared most intimately with. Those were the friends that he shared his heart most deeply with. Those were the friends that he often took on excursions that maybe the others didn't get invited to. I think of the Mount of Transfiguration. It was only Peter, James, and John that got to go there with Jesus, and it was life-changing for them. And so just as Jesus needed close friends, so you and I need close friends. And particularly as moms, you were never meant to do the parenting journey alone. And there are times when you need your other mama friends to pray with you, to brainstorm with you, to listen to you, to cry with you because of whatever's going on in your child's life. As I've thought about this whole idea of complacency, my mind went to a story that Jesus told. It's found in Matthew 25, verses 14 to 32. And you probably know this story as the parable of the talents. Talents were not gifts and ability, they were money, currency, really, basically. And so Jesus tells the story of a landowner who leaves town, and to the first worker, he gives 5 bags of gold or 5 talents. To the second worker, he gives 2. And to the last worker, he gives 1. And he tells them that they are to be stewards. They are to take care of this for him as he's on this long journey. And when he comes back, he discovers that the first gentleman had invested his 5 talents of gold, and he had expanded them into 10 talents of gold or even more. And the second gentleman had taken his 2 talents of gold and he had invested, and his talents of gold had reaped more benefits as well and had grown. However, the third worker, if you remember, had buried his talent, and his excuse to the landowner was, I knew you were going to be hard and exacting, and I didn't want to lose the talent, so I just buried it. And I think that's such a great picture of complacency. A lot of times people look at this parable and they see in it, we are to steward the talents, or the abilities that God has given us. Certainly that's true. To some extent, we are to steward the abilities and the talents that God has given us so that we can use those for his kingdom. But I also think that there's a message in here about stewarding our friendships well, because Jesus, when you think of it, has an awful lot to say about loving one another and caring for one another and carrying each other's burdens. And I believe that scripture teaches us that we are to really treasure one another as friends, that we are to be intentional about treasuring our friendships. Complacency can show up in our lives as we're too busy for friends. Maybe at this point in your life, not only are you trying to raise kids, but you have a full-time job and you're thinking, Becky, I don't even have time for friends. I'm trying to keep my kids alive and I'm trying to climb the corporate ladder. And I get it. But friendship is to be a part of your life too. And so climbing the corporate ladder or being too busy can be a form of complacency as far as your relationships. Another form of complacency that I sometimes find is that as moms, sometimes we just want to veg out with Netflix. So rather than putting the effort into going out with a friend or to joining a Bible study or joining a small group or being with other friends, we just want to lay at home and binge out on Netflix or on social media. Maybe you're scrolling so much and you're spending so much time on Instagram that you really don't have real face-to-face time with your friends. Well, that's a form of complacency. There was an old song that I used to sing when I was a little kid. I don't even know if this song is still around, but I think I learned it at camp, where the song went, find new friends, but keep the old. One is silver and the other is gold. And I still like that song because it reminds me that each one of my friends is as precious and to be treasured like silver or gold. Both silver and gold have gone up a lot in value these days, and our friendships are to be deeply valued by us. I want my friends to know that they are treasured, that they are loved, that they are important in my life. So how do we do this? How do we become intentional in our friendships? I have a couple of suggestions for you. First of all, remember to treasure your friends. Remind yourself when you don't feel like putting the effort in, this friendship is a treasure to me. I'm going to take care of this friendship. I'm going to nurture this friendship. I'm going to intentionally invest in this friendship because it is to be treasured. The second thing that I would suggest is learn to take initiative. It's easy to be complacent. It's easy to use the excuse, well, I'm really an introvert, so I'm not the one that should be reaching out. Listen, whether you're introverted or extroverted, you need friends. And that means you're going to have to take the initiative. Reach out to one of your friends today. Let me challenge you. Pick up the phone and call another mom. Ask if she wants to meet you at the park, or ask if she wants to meet at a local coffee shop and go out for coffee. Who cares if the kids go crazy? They're going to have a good time together anyway. Maybe for you, that means inviting your friends over for dinner this week. It doesn't have to be an expensive dinner, man. You could just order for pizza. Maybe it means inviting your friends over for a Galentine party, and you just invite 5 of your friends over and you say, hey, we're just going to celebrate Valentine's Day by celebrating our friendships with one another, because each one of you is a treasure in my life. Maybe for you, being intentional or taking initiative means just writing a note to one of your friends. Hey, I want you to know how deeply I value our friendship. Another way to take initiative is to bring a meal to somebody. Maybe one of your friends is sick, or just has had a really awful week with her kids, or maybe her husband's out of town, or maybe there's something else going on in her life. Listen, you don't have to be Betty Crocker to bring a meal. Stop by your local Panera and bring soup and salad over, or go to Costco and pick up a rotisserie chicken and some mac and cheese, or order pizza for your friend. But take initiative and be thoughtful in the way you do that, which brings me to my next point. Thoughtfully respond to what's going on in your friend's life. When I get together for coffee with friends or with lunch, as I'm driving to that appointment, I think through what was going on in their life the last time we got together, and what can I ask them about that? I don't want to tell them so much as I want to ask them things. How is the child you were dealing with who was oh so very sick last time we were together? Or how was the trip you recently took where you were able to go on vacation? Or how was the Bible study you were going to start in your home? How is that going? Draw them out thoughtfully. Draw your friends out. Learn to ask good questions. And then tune into what's happening in their lives, but also tune into prayer. Prayer is one of the greatest gifts that you can give your friends to show them how much you treasure them. As we go through this series on friendship, I want you to know that I'm going to be having interviews with several of my good friends, and we're going to be talking about topics like, how do we show up for each other when life's falling apart? Or what does it look like to have a friend maybe who's from a different culture than you? Or what does it look like as friends to learn to take prayer seriously and to pray together? And so I hope you're going to join us for this series. It's going to be a great series where you're going to be able to discover new principles of your friendship that you can put in place. And here's what I want you to know, dear friends. I'm cheering for you. I consider you my friend. Some of you I haven't met, but I would love to hear from you. And you need close friends where you live who will journey through life with you together. So thanks for joining me here today for The Connected Mom. And I want to suggest that you hit the subscribe button so that you never miss another episode. And I hope you're going to join us for this new series we're launching, all about friendships and why we need them in the journey of motherhood. Thanks for joining us.